Hello everyone, I'm Priyadarshini Mara, faculty at the Department of Buddhist Studies, University of Delhi. Today, I'm going to talk to you about module number 10, which is on philosophical foundation of tantrayana. Tantrayana, and it belongs to paper 11 of Philosophy of Buddhism 1. Today, what we're going to deal with is the philosophy of Tantric Buddhism. The study helped to indicate the basics of the ritualistic practice in Buddhism. There is a subsect of Buddhism which is flourished later, and it is called Tantrayana. The philosophical background of Tantric Buddhism gives us motivational characteristic. This is philosophical foundation of what is called or what is known to be Vajrayana Buddhism. Tantra is countless practice of ritual in Asian countries, which is headed by the term Tantra. The similarity among these practices is of ritual action to channelize the divine energy. So when we talk about the tantric practices which are predominant in the Asian nation around various societies, what is one common thing that is there in all these tantric practices? It is the ritual action to channelize the divine energy. So basically, the whole idea of this word tantra, from which we get tantrayana, means to channelize the energy in such a way that it becomes the divine energy, that you have control over all your divine powers. So when we look at this term tantrayana in Buddhism, it's comprised of two words. We divide it, it becomes tantra and yan. So tantra is the practice of controlling all your senses and in developing a certain divine energy. And yan is a vehicle taken to be in its literal sense. So together, this word tantrayana means a vehicle that by controlling all your energies and channelizing them towards the divine takes you to the higher power. And now what is that higher power where all your divine energies are moving? It is the attainment of nirvana or enlightenment. This enlightenment is the goal of any Buddhist schools around, and no matter which school or which sect of Buddhism you belong to, the end goal of every sect is the attainment of enlightenment or nirvana. Tantric Buddhism is called as Vajrayana, Mantrayana and Tantrayana Buddhism. You see, when we talk about Tantric Buddhism, this particular word is called as Vajrayana, Mantrayana and also as Tantrayana. So these are various other words which are used to describe the Tantra in Buddhism. Coming to the historical background and early center of Tantric Buddhism, when we talking about Tantrayana or the Tantric Buddhism or the philosophical foundation of Tantric Buddhism, a little historical background is equally important. So let me acquaint you with the historical background and the center of Tantric Buddhism. The earliest, the Tantra tradition, came out in light through Hindu Vedic tradition. The first Tantric text appeared in India in somewhere around 3rd century and continued the cultural of this tradition till 12th century. So when we look at the origin of Tantra, we see that it came into existence somewhere around 3rd century and survived till, although it still exists in various parts of country as well as the Asian continent, we see that it's not so much predominant. So it is assumed that Tantric Buddhism was fully systematized in northern India. When we look at the historical background of Tantrayan or Tantric Buddhism, we see northern India was the center for Tantric Buddhism to come into existence. From the mythological study, it is believed this Tantric Buddhism developed in Udayan, a small country which was divided into two kingdoms. One was Sambala and the other was Lakapuri. Sambala place has been identified with Sambalpur and Lakanpuri with Subanpur. It is said in mythology that the king Indrabhuti of Sambalapur founded the Vajrayan or the Tantrayan. So we give, according to the mythological stories, we give King Indrabhuti the give honor of Sambalpur and he founded Vajrayan or Tantrayan. According to several scholars, Tantricism was of foreign origin. H.P. Shastri believed that Tantra came from outside of India, but mostly it presumes probably came with the Magi priest of the Scythians. So when we see these historians, they talk about the origin and the coming of Tantra from various other places but India. And when we look at this historian, we see that he says that Magi priest of the Scythians brought Tantricism to India. Other scholar Bhattacharya opinions that the introduction of Shakti worship in religion is un-Indian, that we are constrained to admit it as external or of foreign influences. So when we look at Bhattacharya, he says that it is a foreign existence and it cannot be attached to Indian evolution. Buddhist Tantra is highly developed independently for many centuries. Broadly, the means of Tantra is to attain of enlightenment through the identity with Tantric deities. So when we look at what Buddhist Tantra means, it is the attainment of enlightenment through identity with Tantric deities. It is somewhere called as deity yoga. Therefore, it is necessary to understand that these deities are not believed in as external spirits to be worshipped. So what are we trying to point out when we say that these deities are not believed to be external spirits? So if they are not believed to be external spirits, then what are they? When we say that Tantric Yoga, it is the development of one's own body, one's own mind. And it points out that these deities exist within ourselves. Every one of us can have total control over all our powers of body and mind. So there are archetypes which representing the Tantric practitioner's own deepest nature. Vajrayan is mainly grounded in Mahayana philosophy in case of Madhyamik. Here in this sect, the truths, that is ultimate and conventional reality doctrines are described, which is present in all tenets of Buddhism. So when we look at the truths formulate the basic theory of Buddhism. We talk about two truths in which the entire phenomenal existence as well as beyond that phenomenal existence, things are categorized. So what are these two truths? One is called Samvriti Satya or the empirical truth, which constitutes of all the phenomenal existence. And Then comes the second truth, which goes beyond the phenomenal existence. And what is that truth? That truth is called Paramarth Satya, or the Absolute. So now, when we look, Samvriti constitutes the phenomenal existence. So what does the Absolute or the Paramarth constitutes? It constitutes only enlightenment or the Absolute, which is called Nirvan in Sanskrit and Nibbana in Pali. Now, when we look at the two truth doctrines, our main core of philosophy and its central concept path leads to practice of ritual and its philosophical basis for its methods. It is difficult to suggest the place of Tantricism origination because we get various ideas and various notions from many historians. So there is no consensus as to where tantric practices originate. Vajrayana Buddhist says that tantric practices were expounded by the historical Buddha. The early centers of tantric Buddhism, according to Buddhist scholar B. Bhattacharya, S. K. Dev, Winternitz, etc. The original home of tantric Buddhism was the eastern India, especially Bengal, Assam and Odisha. Nalanda, Vikramashil, Udantapuri were its great center in Pal period. But Rahul Sankrityan believed that Mantrayan and Vajrayan originated around Sri Parvat and Dhyan Katak in Andhra Pradesh. So this is all about the historical background of the origin of Tantra practices in Buddhism, as well as gives the centers of tantric practices. So we see that Andhra Pradesh is supposedly the main center of tantric practices along with West Bengal, Assam and Odisha. So this is for the historical aspect of Tantricism. Now, let us study the tantric philosophy. Buddhist tantra practices known as Vajrayan, Mantrayan, Mahamantrayan, Tantrayan and so on are means to attain the highest truth, the emptiness, the bodhisattvahood or Buddhahood by transformation of the gross or rough level of consciousness into subtlest level of consciousness. So what, according to Buddhism, Tantra means? According to Buddhism, Tantra merely does not mean the practice of controlling senses in order to harm somebody else or in order to get your work done, but it means that the gross or the lower level of consciousness is transformed into the subtle level of consciousness in order to attain the ultimate truth. What is the ultimate truth? As we've talked about it earlier, ultimate truth is the attainment of the Absolute or Nirvana, which is the goal of Buddhism. Be it Vajrayan, Tantrayan, Mantrayan or Mahamantrayan, all these schools point out to only one goal, and that is the attainment of ultimate liberation, which is called Nirvana. So when we look at Tantra practice, it is turning the gross levels of consciousness into subtle level of consciousness. And the goal here is to attain enlightenment. Its practitioners are called as sadhak, yogis or mantrins. According to Buddhist scholar, this particular term Tantra is often considered to be derived from the word Tanu Vistare. Now what is Tanu Vistare? It is extension or expansion, and also from Trai Rakshana, which means protection. Therefore, it expands and protects many things which include Tattva and Mantra. The Buddhist literature defines it as Tahayate Vistarayate Janamen Nan Iti Tantran. That means Tantra is that by which there is extensive expansion of knowledge. Knowledge is nothing but the awareness of consciousness. Let me repeat this again for you. It means that Tantra is that by which there is extensive expansion of knowledge. And what is knowledge? Knowledge is nothing but the awareness of consciousness. So once you are aware of consciousness, which arises by the sense-object contact, then that is the attainment of knowledge. The Guhya Samaj has defined it as Prabandh or continuity. Prabandham Tantra Makhyatam. It means Tantra refers to the continuity. Continuity happens of those which have neither beginning nor end. A thing with beginning cannot be continuous as it starts from somewhere. Similarly, a thing which ends cannot be continuous as it ends somewhere. So when we look at the definition of Tantra given by Guhya Samaj, they say that it means continuity. For them, Tantra means continuity. So what is this continuity? Can a thing which comes into existence and which disappears could be called continuous? No, because continuous does not have a beginning or an end. A thing which cannot be continuous because it has a beginning, and it cannot be continuous as it ends somewhere. Thus, Tantra is the name of the flow or continuity of the conscious with no beginning and end or no ends. So according to them, Tantra is beginningless or endless, and it is a continuous flow of energies. And it should all be noted that all texts which propound things related to esoteric tantric practices are called as Tantra. So when we refer to the esoteric or tantric practices, then all those texts which include these esoteric or tantric practices are called as Tantra. Here, the unbroken flow of consciousness, that is meditation, is not possible for beginning level, but the level of unbroken consciousness could be realized by different paths enunciated by the Buddha, such as Hinayan, Mahayana and Tantrayana. Even there is different form of practices of Tantrayana in Tantra itself. So when we talk about these different forms of meditative practices which leads an individual to the higher truth, which is the attainment of Nirvana, we see that even Mahayana school, Hinayan school and Tantrayana, which is a further exposition or development of Mahayana, they all have different sorts of practices of Tantra. And even within Tantrayana, we see a lot of many different varieties of practices or the tantric practices. From the standpoint of Abhidheya, what is Abhidheya? Abhidheya is something to be receivable. So, from the point of Abhidheya, 3 types of Tantra are mentioned. So, when we see that Abhidheya, which is to be receivable, from that point of view, there are 3 types of Tantra. What are those 3 types of Tantra? First is Hetu or base. Second is Upay, which is the means or path. And the third is Phala, which is the result. So the first one is Hetu, second one is Upay, and the third one is Phala. Hetu Tantra. What is Hetu Tantra? It is the consciousness itself, and this consciousness itself is the base of Tantra. The consciousness of the people being despite a bodhicitta is covered with incoming defilements or artificial defilements. So in spite you are on that way of developing bodhicitta, there are certain defilements which continue to be with you. It is quite identical to the seed which yield fruits by coming in contact to certain supporting factors. The consciousness of a being is pure after the destruction of incoming pollutants, and he is known as the Buddha. So when the incoming pollutants or the defilements are totally removed or destructed, the person becomes a Buddha. Thus, the consciousness is called as Hetu Tantra. The defiled state of the consciousness is the cause of sixth birth. When you look at the defiled state of this particular consciousness that we are talking about, it is the cause of sixth birth. Being matured and refined, it is the cause of the Buddhahood. So the same consciousness leads to sixth birth when it is in defiled state, and when this defilement is removed, it becomes refined and matured, and it becomes the cause of the Buddhahood. So as you can see that we're talking about the refinement of a particular consciousness or a particular conscious state which is defiled. A sadhak. Who is a sadhak? A sadhak is the tantra practitioner. Any practitioner who practices tantra is called a sadhak. A sadhak has nothing to do except to expirate the incoming defilements which distort or change the real nature of consciousness. Therefore, it is said that it always remains static in one nature. Thus, it could be said that very consciousness is the base of its pollution and also of its purification. So this particular consciousness is doing both the works of being a pollutant, and once the pollutants are removed, this very consciousness becomes a purification, a source of purification. Hence, the consciousness is called Hetu Tantra. So this is what is Hetu Tantra. Now coming to the second consciousness, which is Upay Tantra. Upay Tantra is the tendencies of the consciousness which convert Hetu, which is the base, into Phal, which is the fruit. So here, when we look at Upay Tantra, it is that tendency which converts Hetu or the base consciousness into Phal or the resultant, which is also defined literally as the fruit. So any action that we do has a resultant. Suppose a seed is sowed in the soil and it turns out to be a tree. So a tree becomes the fruit of that seed, which is a part of the action. Now, that is the factor or the element which is helpful and supporting factor in yielding resultant, and this is what is called upay. For example, just as water, light, soil, fertilizer, etc. are supporting factor in order to bring in fruits from a particular seed, in the same way, the effort made or the path followed to attain maturity and purity of consciousness are called upay. So when we look at this particular word upay, it actually means that there is a certain need for certain factors in order to take us to that higher level of attainment. Can it only be the seed on the ground which gives rise to a particular tree? Not necessary that the human factors are involved in bringing up a tree, but there are certain other conditions as well, like sunlight, rain, water, and all those fertilizers which are naturally available to that seed, and hence it gives rise to a tree. So these are the upaya for the seed in order to give rise to that tree, which here, if we look at this particular example, we see that seed is the hetu, upaya are the factors that act in bringing up that seed, and phala is the fruit or the tree. So, in the same way, we see that the efforts made or the path followed to attain maturity and purity of consciousness are called upaya. What are these paths? These paths are the following of a virtuous action or a virtuous life. This very upaya is called upaya tantra because it continuously attains expansion in form of the tradition and meditation of preaching and initiation. Because of this expansion, it is called as upaya tantra. So this is upaya tantra. Now coming to the third tantra, it is called phala tantra. The phala tantra means the orientation of fruit inherently established in the hetu. When we talk about phala tantra, we see that it is the orientation of fruit which inherently establishes in the hetu. The appearance of the hidden pure tendencies or attitudes in the hetu level of consciousness is phala tantra. So that means what we're trying to state here is that this particular phal or the fruit of action is already present in the seed or the base. So basically the base has the fruits or actions already existing. It is the use or the means through certain upayas which give rise to this particular phal. So it is potentially, it is there, lying there, and just needs to have certain factors which can give rise to it. Just as a fruit are inherently established in the flower of the tree, in the same way the consciousness being purified by means of upaya tantra, the transformation into bodhi or enlightenment. So that consciousness which is already present but is in a defiled state, so through certain conditions there is a purification of that consciousness, and that transforms the defiled consciousness into purified consciousness and leads to the attainment of bodhi or enlightenment. Phal is also tantra as it remains always established in unbroken form. The dharmakaya is by nature permanent or eternal because there is no distortion or deformity. On the account of continued use of dharma by sambhogkaya and continuous welfare of the being of nirmankaya, the unbroken continuity of the consciousness with no beginning and end, or the appearance of the base of that particular path, the processes of the practitioner, these all together are called tantra. In the different Buddhist views, it has been propounded by different names such as Tathagat Garbh, Sugat Garbh, Mahamudra, Bodhicit, etc. So when we see that different Buddhist views have different names for this particular tantra, it can be called Tathagat Garbh, it can be called Sugat Garbh or Mahamudra or also Bodhicit. So this is all about the three categories of tantra: hetu, upaya and phal. Now coming to the classes of tantra according to practitioner, it is divided basically into 4 types, and these 4 types are defined by different scholar and Buddhist texts. So the first one is Kriya Tantra, which literally means action. Kriya Tantra is the first of the outer tantras and places a major and special emphasis on ritualistic actions. So when we talk about Kriya Tantra, we say that it is of higher actions, or the actions which we generally perform in order to reach that higher level. So second one is Charya Tantra. So when we say Kriya Tantra refers to actions. Then comes Charya Tantra, which means performance tantra. Is the second of the outer tantras, and although it maintains a strong emphasis on external ritual actions like Kriya Tantra, the emphasis is now upon the path obtaining liberation through meditation. So the first one is Kriya Tantra and the second one is Charya Tantra, which emphasizes on the performance of a particular tantric practice. The third one is Yoga Tantra. Yoga Tantra means the most sublime of the three outer tantras. It includes a class of Buddhist tantric literature as well as praxis associated with this class. The Yoga Tantra is evident in both Shraman traditions of Tibetan Buddhism as well as the Yan of different other traditions. So we've seen that there is Kriya Tantra, Charya Tantra and Yoga Tantra. Now coming to the last one is Anuttar Yoga Tantra. It is translated in English as Unexcelled Yoga Tantra or Highest Yoga Tantra. So this is Anuttar Yoga Tantra. Now we see that this together formulates the philosophical foundation of Tantric Buddhism. And this gives a basic understanding of what kind of Tantra practices are following and will be followed, and the kinds of Tantra which are divided into three, and then Anuttar Yoga and different types of yoga, being Anuttar Yoga being the ultimate of all the other yogic practices or the tantric practices. So at the end of the day, Tantra only refers to transforming the gross levels of consciousness into subtle level of consciousness and the constant flow of divine energy. So this is all about the philosophical foundation of Tantra. Thank you.